movie industry is continually going through different trends, with one of the biggest right now, as is so often the case, being remakes. Movie studios often look to exploit nostalgia and stand on the shoulders of something that came before in an attempt to produce something successful. However, said success has always been hit and miss. While some of Disney's live-action reboots of animated classics have earned a place in the billion-dollar club, and a select few have genuinely surpassed the original from which they were based, more often than not, a remake will not be welcomed with open arms. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for What Culture, here with 10 more upcoming movie remakes nobody wants. Number 10. The Burbs. Today, Tom Hanks is arguably one of the most recognizable faces and voices in all of Hollywood. However, before the likes of Castaway, Forrest Gump, and Toy Story, in the very early years of his would-be legendary career, he starred in Joe Dante's black comedy, The Burbs. It's a kooky story about Hanks' Ray Peterson and the paranoia around some shady newcomers to his little community. This 1989 picture is a charming one and has found a small pocket of popularity in the years since it initially released to little to no fanfare. But it's certainly not one of Hanks' best or most memorable roles. So it's difficult to see what there is to gain from rebooting The Burbs as a TV series on Peacock. Keke Palmer is set to star in this new take, but this really does feel like rehashing something simply for the sake of it. Seth MacFarlane is currently attached to the project as an executive producer, which, when added to the new version of The Naked Gun he has in the works with Liam Neeson, makes for a rather uninspired upcoming schedule.
Really quickly, before we get to this video, I want to talk to you about Hims weight loss treatment plans. You can check out the more in-depth look that we've got at Hims weight loss treatment plans on this video right here. But the gist of it is, Hims is looking to provide you with access to a lifestyle change that is personalised to you, starting as low as $69 per month with a 10-month plan. Thanks again to Hims for sponsoring this video right here today. But if you are interested, then start your assessment now at the link in the description and begin your weight loss journey today.
Number 9. Clue. From one cult classic to another, from The Burbs to Jonathan Lynn's Clue. The 1985 effort was based on the board game of the same name, or Cluedo in the UK, and though Clue saw minimal commercial or even critical success at the time, it's gained a following later on in life. Clue is a fun murder mystery, made better by such a wonderful cast, and was unique when it released in that there were 3 different endings released in different cinemas. But how much of this will actually be recaptured when it's made again? There was such a project in the works for many years with Ryan Reynolds and Jason Bateman attached, but that was dead in the water once Sony picked up the rights, with a completely new iteration now being worked on. Still, Clue caught lightning in a bottle, and that will be tough to reproduce. Over the last 5 years, Rian Johnson has proved with his Knives Out franchise that truly compelling original murder mystery movies are possible. So why come back to one from 40 years ago? Number 8. Lilo and Stitch. In all the years since Disney began remaking every film ever produced by the studio, The Jungle Book is about the only one you could argue was worth doing. Yet all the same, classic animated movies keep being brought into live action. And one of the next to come is Lilo and Stitch. Releasing in May 2025, the little blue alien will come to lighten Lilo's life again. But why? Does anyone think that being live action would make it better? These films are produced as though they would be upgrades, but that's almost never the case. With Disney's animation, there is always far more to the characters than in the remakes. It's as though the life and soul are sucked out of something beloved, and it's hard to imagine that things will be any different with Lilo and Stitch. Yes, the animation of the latter looks incredible, but so does the 2002 version. More realistic visuals don't always mean better, something hopefully Disney will learn sooner rather than later. Sad to say that's unlikely, as Lilo and Stitch isn't the only remake coming up, but more on that one shortly. Number 7. The Mummy. Remaking a popular movie comes with all sorts of pitfalls, and arguably one of the biggest is that it automatically has to step out of the shadow of something great. Be different enough for there to be a reason to do it, but not so different that it loses all sense of what made the original so popular in the first place. In 2017, when Universal tried to launch its dark universe, populated by the likes of Dracula and Frankenstein, The Mummy failed dreadfully. So dreadfully, in fact, that there was never even a second entry in the franchise, as the dark universe ended then and there. With the announcement that yet another Mummy remake is in the works, Lee Cronen's film has the unenviable task of having to follow not only an incredibly popular movie, but also a shambles of one too. Even if there was a smattering of interest in a Mummy reboot 7 years ago, there certainly isn't now. Blumhouse and Cronen, director of Evil Dead Rise, may yet produce a fantastic take on the subject. But even if they do, does anyone care at this point? Tom Cruise and Russell Crowe failed. Maybe this one is best left alone for a while. Number 6, The Running Man. After rising to the top thanks to the likes of Top Gun Maverick, Anyone But You, and Hitman, Glen Powell is one of the hottest properties in Hollywood right now. Add in Edgar Wright, acclaimed director of, among others, the Cornetto trilogy, and you have the very beginning of what could be a fun movie. However, the pair are coming together for a reimagining of 80s Arnie classic The Running Man. And it almost feels like Paramount threw a few darts and attached a few random names to a random film. Yes, The Running Man is a fun flick, but does it really need to be remade? Even with the talent currently slated to work on the movie? The dystopian future market is only getting more and more saturated by the day. And though it came out years after the original Running Man, The Hunger Games has kind of cornered the dystopian future fight-to-the-death reality TV show scene, as niche as it may be. Couldn't Wright and Powell come together on something more original rather than Paramount's attempt to exploit 80s nostalgia? Number 5, Train to Busan. How do you stand out in a genre that is only getting more and more saturated as the years go by? It feels as though just about everything that can be done in the zombie world has been done. From independent found footage films to huge blockbusters and even zom-coms. 2016, however, saw the release of something special with Train to Busan. The South Korean picture portrayed a man on the titular train experiencing the rapid spread of a zombie epidemic within the terrifying and claustrophobic confines of a moving vehicle. It was incredibly popular and received almost unanimous critical acclaim. Also, in 2016, off the back of the huge success of that movie, an American remake was announced, since going on to be titled Last Train to New York. With the original easily accessible with English subtitles, immediately putting such a redo into development couldn't feel more like a shortcut to a quick cash grab. Hopefully this won't result in someone in Hollywood thinking that producing exactly the same film but in a different language is reason enough to reproduce a very recent movie. But it feels as though that is likely the case. As the project has been stuck in development hell for some years now, it's possible that audiences will never actually get to see it. And it's hard to imagine too many people will be too beaten up about that. Number 4, Tangled. Back to another soulish cash grab from Disney now, and while Lilo & Stitch is set to release in 2025, Tangled has only just been announced. Naturally, details are still scarce at this early stage, with nothing released other than a rumoured interest in The Greatest Showman and Better Man director Michael Gracey. Given the man's previous filmography, Gracey will likely be a good fit for the musical, but not good enough that the usual doubts and misgivings about Disney's reboots will disappear. There is no reason to believe that this won't be just another shot-for-shot remake that does nothing but remove any personality and joy from the screen. It's a similar point to make as with Lilo & Stitch. But why is live action always considered superior in these instances? Tangled was Disney's first film to be created with 3D animation. And it's beautiful, and will not be improved by Rapunzel's hair glowing a CGI glow. Until recently, people may have looked at the mere 14-year gap between Tangled's 2010 release and the announcement of a remake as a ridiculously short amount of time. But then Disney skewed this by putting another go at Moana into production less than a decade after the original. Make no mistake though, 14 years is still a ridiculously short amount of time. Number 3, Highlander. In Highlander, it was said that there can be only one, and you'd be forgiven for wishing this applied to actual Highlander movies as well. The original from 1986 was a charming effort that has become something of a cult classic in the years since. But the same certainly cannot be said about what has followed. The 3 sequels have an accumulative score of just 16% on Rotten Tomatoes, including an ultra-rare 0% for Highlander 2: The Quickening. Lore was retconned, important details were ignored or forgotten completely, and the shine was taken off the original. Yes, it's incredibly difficult to produce a good reboot of a good film, but it is an equally gargantuan task to do so off the back of such a limp over the finish line. Is there any interest at all in another Highlander outing? It's been 25 years since the last movie, and Henry Cavill will likely do as good a job in the lead role as anybody. But surely there is no one clamoring to revisit the franchise, particularly as it will be brought into beyond present-day New York and Hong Kong, according to director Chad Stahelski, and thus leaving behind the setting and landscape that went such a long way to making the original so popular. Number 2, the Blair Witch Project. Marketing has always been an incredibly important aspect of the cinematic industry, as it arguably doesn't matter how good a film is if nobody goes to see it. There is also the cold, hard fact that the bottom line matters, and making money is typically the #1 priority for any movie studio. Getting a project to go viral across the internet and social media is key, as this can help even poor films become successful at the box office. However, the Blair Witch Project managed to do this without today's technology, before even the turn of the millennium. That 1999 found footage picture was groundbreaking, in that it was sold as being a true story thanks to missing persons posters and the like, as well as having IMDb list the actors as missing and presumed dead. This, rather than anything that actually happened on screen, is what made the Blair Witch Project such a cultural phenomenon. And with the world now fully aware of what happened, what possible appeal could there be in remaking it? Just look at the poor reception of both the 2000 sequel and the first reboot just 8 years ago. Blumhouse would appear to be trying to remake a movie that has already proven it can't be remade. Number 1, Snow White. Let's start with something positive here. Though there have been several different adaptations over the years, at least this isn't a remake of a film first released within the last 15 years. It's an incredibly low bar set for something positive, but it's about the only plus to be taken from 2025's Snow White at this time. The live-action reboot of Disney's 1937 classic has been riddled with issues, including controversy, development hell, and much more. Some of the pre-release criticisms included taking roles from actors in the dwarfism community in favour of CGI characters, and controversy around star Rachel Zegler suggesting that certain aspects of the original needed to be updated. Regardless of the issues behind the camera though, the recent release of the Snow White trailer hasn't exactly helped matters, as potential audiences have largely been unimpressed by what they've seen. From the design of the dwarves to doubts about Gal Gadot portraying the evil queen and more. Any Disney remake has one hell of a mountain to climb from the very beginning, but Snow White arguably has more than most. It feels as though this is destined to continue the trend of these outputs being very poorly received.